Lily had always been the dutiful daughter, the quiet bridge between chaos and order, and a house built on crumbling expectations and controlled by a man whose voice was thunder and whose temper was lightning. The weeks leading up to her interview were a blur of scheduling, rehearsing answers, and studying company reports late into the night, each page a prayer for change. Each moment a chance at escape from a life where she'd been conditioned to serve rather than dream. But that morning, while the world outside hummed with the promise of opportunity, inside her home was a brewing storm. It wasn't unusual for breakfast to be eaten in silence, for her father to sit at the head of the table with his newspaper like it was a decree of power, while her mother moved about nervously, her every step dictated by the mood that morning. But today was different. Lily didn't bother hiding the anxious energy pulsing through her veins as she reheated her coffee, trying to keep her hands from shaking. She had to leave in 30 minutes, early enough to account for traffic, time to breathe, and maybe even a moment to stand outside the building and remind herself that she belonged there. Her sister Emily burst into the kitchen, a whirlwind of perfume and teenage entitlement, whining about how the mall hours had changed and how she needed to buy a dress for her friend's totally crucial birthday party. Lily didn't look up. She had learned long ago that silence was armor, though flimsy in this house. Her father, without lowering the newspaper, muttered something Lily couldn't hear. Then, with a slow, deliberate folding of pages and a gaze sharpened by years of unchallenged authority, he spoke. "Lily, you'll take your sister to the mall today. Emily, make sure you're ready in 10. Lily blinked, a momentary neurological misfire, hoping she'd misheard. I can't, she said quietly, knowing what was coming. My interview is today. I told you. Before she could finish, the room froze. Her father placed the newspaper down and rose from his seat with the unsettling calm that always came before the storm. You can't, he repeated, moving closer. Your sister needs you. Emily shrugged, scrolling through her phone. It's not like it's a big deal. They'll have other interviews, she said with a smirk, oblivious or perhaps indifferent to the weight of her sister's sacrifice. Lily felt something shift inside her, a crack in the foundation of years spent abandoning herself for others. It is a big deal, she said louder this time. I've worked for this. This is my chance. Her jaw worked furiously, a muscle twitching near his temple. Your family comes first, always. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low rumble. If you walk out that door, don't think you're coming back to a place under this roof. For years, that threat had been enough to silence her. Fear, obligation, the desire to keep the peace. These were the chains that bound her. But today, something else rose within her. Not rebellion, not anger, something simpler, something sadder. Clarity. She looked at her father, really looked at him. The man who'd preached loyalty but offered none. The man who demanded obedience but never respect. The man who'd called her family yet never once treated her like she mattered. Maybe that's the roof that's holding me down, she whispered. In an explosive motion, he grabbed her by the arm, slamming her against the wall with a force that stole her breath. The world blurred for a split second as beads of coffee spattered against the floor, and Lily's vision narrowed to a pinhole view of her father's furious face. Don't you dare talk to me like that. His breath was hot, his grip a vice around her wrist. Somewhere behind them, Emily gasped, but did nothing. Lily felt her body tense, fear mixing with something new, fire. It took every ounce of strength to not tremble, to not shrink away the way she always had. She met his eyes steady and unflinching. Then don't give me reason to. The words were small, but they held mountains. He released her with a shove, disgust etched across his face. Go, ruin your life. She didn't answer. She didn't look at Emily, or her mother who now stood in the doorway wide-eyed and mute, a lifetime of learned helplessness weighing her down. She grabbed her bag, her keys, and walked out the door. Each step felt like shedding a layer of fear, of guilt, of invisible chains. The air outside was cold, stinging her lungs, bringing her back to life. She sat in her car, heart racing, hands trembling. She could still hear his voice echoing in her skull, could still feel the imprint of his hand bruising her skin, but she started the engine. And she drove. Toward a future she'd almost given up on. Toward a room where she would sit across from people who would see her potential, not stifle it. Toward a version of herself who didn't apologize for wanting more. She looked in the rearview mirror once, home shrinking in the distance, like a prison receding. And then she kept driving. The interview was an hour. She was ready, even if she didn't feel like it. Even if this was the hardest thing she'd ever done. Because today wasn't just about getting a job. Today was the first day she chose herself. And that was a revenge her father would never see coming. Lily's hands still trembled as she stepped into the sleek glass building, but her resolve had hardened into something fortified by necessity, something carved from the silent years she'd spent diminishing herself. The interview panel sat before her, 3 professionals whose eyes followed her with curiosity, not judgment, and as she began to speak, she felt her voice settle into a steady rhythm, clear and confident, surprising even herself. She talked about her academic accomplishments, her late nights spent learning coding languages on her own, the projects she'd spearheaded at her local library to teach young girls about tech, all while the words of her father hovered faintly like static in the back of her mind. You'll ruin your life. But the more she spoke, the more the static faded. By the time the interview ended, the hiring manager, a woman with kind eyes and a fierceness that mirrored something in Lily, leaned forward and said, "You're impressive, Lily. We'll be in touch very soon." Walking out of the room, Lily felt the kind of weightlessness one experiences just before taking flight. But as she reached her car, reality pressed in. The bruise on her arm throbbed faintly, a reminder of the life she'd temporarily escaped. She sat in the driver's seat, breathing deeply, contemplating her next move. Going back wasn't an option, not when her father's rage still simmered, not when her mother's silence still stung. She drove instead to her friend Nicole's tiny apartment, a place filled with mismatched blankets, half-read books, and most importantly, space for breathing. Nicole entered the door in pajama pants and a look of concern that tightened into outrage when she saw Lily's bruised arm. "He grabbed you again?" Nicole asked, voice low but trembling. "And this time it didn't scare me," Lily confessed. "It made me realize I can't keep pretending that's normal." Nicole brewed coffee, gently pressing Lily for details, her presence grounding, her outrage validating. The next day, Lily received the call. She'd gotten the job, a full-time position, starting in 2 weeks, with a salary that made her eyes widen and her heart thunder. They loved her passion, her clear drive, her grit. She would have cried from joy if not for the lingering ache of something else. A sadness, maybe, or exhaustion. That night, she sat alone in Nicole's kitchen with the letter of employment in her hand. She thought of all the years she'd folded herself into corners, the times she bit back words to keep peace, the burned dinners, the slammed doors, the way her mother's eyes had always looked quietly haunted. "I'm going back," she told Nicole the next morning, surprising them both. Not to stay, to say goodbye. It wasn't revenge, not in the way people imagine revenge, with fire and fury and standing over the ruins. Lily's revenge would be quieter, sharper. It would be leaving the house her father commanded, not as a runaway girl or scared daughter, but as a woman who knew her worth. She pulled up to the driveway that evening, the house looming like a memory she never asked to keep. Inside, the tension was thick enough to taste. Emily was in the living room, scrolling on her phone, but she stopped mid-scroll when Lily entered. Her mother peeked from the kitchen, eyes wide, as though expecting an explosion. Her father wasn't in sight, but she could feel him. Emily stood, awkward for once. "Did you get it?" she asked, voice small. "I did." Emily's face crumpled, then steadied. "That's good." This was the girl who had rolled her eyes while Lily was berated, the girl who had always been shielded from the brunt of responsibility.
But beneath the years of favoritism, Emily was still just a child trying to survive. Lily exhaled softly. What you said that morning hurt, but it wasn't all your fault. We were taught that my needs didn't matter. Emily nodded, and in her eyes was something like recognition. Their father entered the room then, and the room chilled. Back already? He sneered. What, they reject you? Lily met his gaze with a steadiness she never felt before. No, they offered me the job. His lip curled, but his voice faltered. He hadn't expected this. He'd expected the world to confirm what he always preached, that Lily's ambition was a joke, that she belonged only in service. And I'm leaving, she continued, for good. You're not walking out of this house, he said, stepping closer, that same dangerous calm in his voice. You don't get to just decide you're done. She held out the envelope with her offer letter inside. This says I do. The air rippled with tension. For a moment he looked poised to strike again, to grab her, to shove her, to remind her of her place. But there it was in her eyes. Not fear, not even rebellion, just resolute, a thing he couldn't break or scare away. Her mother stepped forward then, voice quivering. Let her go, she said. It was the first time she'd heard her speak in defiance, even if it was barely above a whisper. Her father turned toward her, rage sparking, but Lily's voice cut through the moment. You can blame me, but someday you'll see it wasn't me who walked away from this family. It was you. She walked past him, and he didn't reach for her. She picked up her bag, opened the door, and stepped into the night. Behind her, she could hear her mother's muffled cries, Emily's shaky breath. She hoped someday they would understand. She hoped someday they would wake up and want more too. For now, she drove back to Nicole's, the streetlights blurring as she blinked away tears, not of fear or loss, but of a tiny, flickering joy. Freedom wasn't loud. It was a quiet thing, a small flame in the dark. And tonight, it was hers.
Lily settled more fully into Nicole's apartment over the next week, the rhythm of a new life slowly taking shape around her, quiet but liberating. She'd wake early, sip coffee at the window, and watch the city wake up without the familiar weight of her father's disapproving stare or the suffocating demand to conform. Though she felt relief, she also felt the ghost of guilt brushing against her thoughts. Guilt for leaving her sister, for leaving her mother, for choosing herself so blatantly for the first time in her life. But Nicole reminded her again and again, choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. In the days before her job was set to begin, Lily sought therapy, something she'd always considered but never imagined actually pursuing. The therapist, a gentlewoman named Dr. Hansen, asked questions that reached into corners Lily didn't know were dusty, questions about her sense of self, about the years she'd spent internalizing silence as a coping mechanism, about what it meant to untangle her own desires from those forced upon her. You've been surviving, Dr. Hansen said during one of their sessions, but surviving isn't the same as living. Now you have the chance to live. Lily let those words sit in her, sinking in like warm light on frost. But while Lily's world was expanding, her family was contracting. Emily called her one night, voice trembling. Their father had found unpaid bills. He'd exploded, shouting that Lily's absence had ruined them. Lily listened quietly to her sister's sobs. You shouldn't have to fix the hole someone else burned into you, she said gently. But I can help if you want to leave too. Emily was silent for a long time, her breaths uneven. I'm not brave like you. I don't think I can do it. Lily closed her eyes, aching. You don't have to be me. You just have to want better. And I'll be here when you're ready. The call ended, leaving Lily feeling the sharp duality of her newfound freedom. It was a gift and a separation, a doorway and a toll. She grieved a little every time she thought of her family, but that grief was clean now, not laced with the poison of obligation. When her first day at the tech firm arrived, she dressed in her best blouse and blazer, her bruise fading but still visible like a phantom signature. She decided not to cover it. It reminded her of what she'd survived, of what she would never allow again. The office was sleek, modern, filled with warm wood and natural light. Her team welcomed her, truly welcomed her, and she felt the strange, almost dizzying confidence of being somewhere she belonged. She found comfort in the work, solace in the problem solving, even excitement in the pacing and collaboration. Her manager, the same woman from her interview, pulled her aside on lunch break. "You're not just good at this, you're meant for it." Lily felt her throat tighten with gratitude. After work, she didn't return to Nicole's. Instead, she bought groceries and went to a small Airbnb she'd rented for herself. It was nothing special, just 2 rooms and a balcony, but it was hers. The key was hers. The lock was hers. Her life, slowly, finally, was hers. She cooked dinner, the small kitchen filling with the scent of food she chose, music she liked, and that evening she sat on the balcony looking up at the night sky and allowed herself to feel everything. The grief, the joy, the ache of letting go, the thrill of stepping forward, the disbelief that she'd made it. She picked up a notebook and for the first time in years began to write, not for school, not for work, not for anyone else, just to remember, just to breathe. She wrote about the interview, about Nicole's fierce friendship, about her mother's whispered, "Let her go," about Emily's fear, and about the bruised girl who had once stood small under the weight of a planted foot, now walking upright and untethered. Later, her phone buzzed. Another message from Emily. "I think I want to leave. I'm scared." She smiled softly, heart cracking just slightly. She typed back, "That's okay. I'll help you. You can start with 1 step." And she would. She'd stand beside Emily just as Nicole stood beside her. That night, Lily went to sleep with the window open, the sounds of the city filling the quiet space. Her thoughts eased into something gentle, something free. Tomorrow, she'd go to work. She'd make mistakes and learn new things. She'd teach herself to take up space, to dream without apology. In the absence of fear, she'd build a life not against something, but for herself. And that, she realized, was the purest revenge. Not anger, not fire, but living fully in a world that had once tried to convince her she didn't deserve to have a voice.
Months passed, and Lily found her life unfolding like a book she'd never dared to write, each chapter revelatory and stirring, bursting with triumphs she once feared and opportunities she once doubted she deserved. Her work at the tech firm thrived, her ideas welcomed, her voice no longer wavering, and she became known for a thoughtfulness and clarity that inspired even her most seasoned colleagues. She had learned to inhabit her space fully, to laugh when she meant it, to decline when she needed to, and to claim her own boundaries with the same quiet authority she once used to bite back tears. Emily eventually left home too, showing up at Lily's door late one night with a duffel bag, mascara smudged, and a quiver in her voice. "I'm ready now," she whispered. Lily pulled her in, the embrace both fierce and gentle, the door closing behind them with the kind of finality that felt like freedom, not erasure, but rebirth. They spent weeks sharing their stories, their scars, their whispered fears that they might never learn what peace truly felt like, until one evening on the small balcony, both wrapped in blankets and quiet starlight, Emily turned to Lily and said, "I never saw you cry when things were bad. I thought you didn't feel anything. But now I get it. You felt everything and still survived." Lily smiled, not with pride, but with understanding. Survival was only the beginning. Healing was the journey. Her father reached out twice, once by phone, an apology wrapped in deflection, a half-hearted attempt at mending what he'd still refused to name, and once through a letter that arrived in creased paper and dried ink, addressed to Lily as if he still had the right to summon her. She burned it in a metal bowl on the balcony, watching the words curl into ash and float away, swallowed by night air she now breathed freely. Her mother sent a postcard once, a simple, "I hope you're well," scrawled in a tight hand, and Lily kept it.
not because she missed her mother, but because she understood the quiet ache of someone too broken to break out. She forgave her, not in a grand gesture, but in a small, silent space in her heart where she let go of what could never be reclaimed. Therapy had become a ritual, a safe space where Lily excavated years of suppression and learned the language of self-trust and self-belonging. Dr. Hansen often said, "You are not the ending you were handed. You're the author of your own ending now." And Lily believed her. She even began mentoring girls in a local community center, teaching them about confidence and coding, showing them how to speak loudly, to dream boldly, to take up space invisible hands might try to shrink. Whenever one of them hesitated, Lily would lean in and say, "You're allowed to want more. You're allowed to become more." On weekends, she'd take Emily on small adventures, day trips, art shows, open mics, rebuilding their bond not on shared history of neglect, but on shared discovery of joy. Slowly, the anxiety faded. The tension in her shoulder loosened. The dreams of her father shouting became less frequent. She found herself waking up not bracing, but hopeful. One evening, as summer surrendered to autumn, Lily returned to her childhood neighborhood, not to visit their old house, but to drive past it. She parked across the street and sat for a moment, seeing it without the filter of memory. The peeling paint, the empty porch, the dim kitchen window where she once stood washing dishes in silence. She felt no pull, no ache, just a nod to the girl who had walked out for the last time, and a deep breath for the woman who would never walk back in. She drove away with the windows down, letting the wind fill her lungs, her hair, her life. Later that night she journaled, a ritual now, writing words that came not from wounds, but from wisdom. She wrote, "I used to think survival was the point. But survival is just the passage. The point is to live, to breathe without apology, to want without shame, to love without fear. And to know I owe no one the version of myself they demanded, only the version I choose to become." The moon was bright, shimmering through unseen clouds, and Lily put down her pen with a soft smile. She turned off the light, crawled into bed, and slept without fear, no longer haunted by the past, but held by a growing sense of self. Forged in fire, softened in freedom, a woman who no longer needed revenge because she had reclaimed her life. She was her own triumph. She was her own ending.